your host for the day today is Anthony Quinn. Yay!
Thank you very much, Daria. No one gets a crowd going like Daria. I wish she would show up at my house once in a while, get the kids excited. How much you pay? How much? So I think we are ready to go, and with that, I want to say good morning. Good afternoon, perhaps now, wherever you are in Canada looking in. My name is Anthony Quinn, and I am the Chief Operating Officer of the Canadian Association of Retired Persons. Moses Neimer, the Chairman of the Board, has asked me to assume the role of Chair for this meeting and conduct the business on today's agenda. The audited financial statements and the minutes from last year's annual general meeting have been circulated here in the room and shared on our website homepage. For those of you online, you will have the opportunity to vote on the motions presented today using the poll function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. At the time of the motion, you are welcome to vote in favor, opposed, or you may abstain. We will allow a few minutes or maybe seconds for members to cast their votes for each motion. And if you have a general question of the Board of Directors, or if a question comes to mind during the meeting, we will have some time to take those questions following the business portion of the meeting. Please enter your questions in the chat function if you are watching us from home, and my colleague Siobhan will be monitoring the chat and she will bring those questions to us here in the room. And with that introduction, I will now call this meeting to order. We have 47 CARP members in good standing present in the room. On Zoom, there are over 400 members participating and another 1,792 CARP members represented by proxy. As such, we have a quorum of the members of the corporation present, and I declare the meeting properly constituted for the transaction of business. All members of the current CARP Board of Directors are present, minus Maura Cohen. So Maura sends her regrets. Perhaps she's joining us online today. In attendance here in Toronto is the Chairman of the Board, Moses Neimer. Rudy Boutenol is the Vice Chairman of the Board. Bill Van Gorder is the Treasurer of the Board. And representing us from BC today is Carmen Ruiz-Ilaza, who is standing as a candidate for a new Board of Director member. We are also joined virtually by many of our CARP chapter volunteers from across the country, and we ask them to please click in and request to be seen on the screen, and perhaps we can have you joining us virtually in the background. I will now take a motion to approve the minutes of the annual general meeting that took place on February 22nd, 2024. And we have asked for some help with those motions from our members here in the audience. Please stand up, sir, say your name, and give us the motion.
My name is Mark DeMarco, and I second.
Oh, I need someone to give us that motion first. The motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
Right. My name is Melka Shangi. I move that the minutes of the annual general meeting dated February 22nd, 2024 be accepted, and that the reading of said minutes at the AGM be dispensed with.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Marco, now's your time. Do I have a second for that motion?
I second that motion.
Thank you very much, Marco. There is a motion before the membership to approve the minutes of the annual general meeting held on February 22nd, 2024, and that the reading of said minutes be dispensed with. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will now call the vote. If you're online, please vote now for motion number 1. In the room, all in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed, please raise their hand. Any abstentions? We'll give the folks at home a few more seconds to vote. And looking at the total results, that motion carries. Thank you very much. We now move on to the presentation of financial statements. I now recognize Serge Blumenfeld, the CFO of Zoomer Media Limited. For those members who are not aware, CARP contracts the management of our association's financial affairs to ZML. Mr. Blumenfeld, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here to present the financial results for our fiscal 2024. The auditors, RSSM, chartered accountants, chartered professional accountants, have issued an unqualified opinion of our financial statements for the fiscal year, and the report has already been posted on the on the CARP website. The audit report focused on 5 primary elements. One is fair presentation and compliance, which they found to be clean. So our results have been published and made public in a fair and clean and concise manner. Going concern considerations, the auditors did not find any risks or concerns with regards to the ongoing operations of CARP. Audit procedures and risk assessment. The auditors have assessed our financial reporting risks and found no significant deficiencies. Related party transactions, they noted the relationship between CARP and Zoomer as part of their review, which continues with our ongoing operations. And legal contingencies, the auditors have confirmed that every legal contingency has been properly recognized and reported publicly. In terms of key financial highlights, revenue performance. 2024 saw a 5% decline in revenues, so we moved from $1.7 million in 2023 to $1.63 million in 2024. In terms of expenses, on the expense side, we saw a decline in expenses as well to offset some of the revenue declines, and we are seeing a 13% decline in expense on a year-over-year basis, moving from $1.8 million to $1.64 million. In terms of cash flows, the annual deficit for CARP was at $10,000, which is significantly better than the prior year, where the deficit was $163,000. Finally, there is a portion regarding deferred revenue, which is the subscribers that we have and the members that we have for CARP. We're showing a healthy balance of $762,000. In terms of path forward, we've got membership retention and growth are one of the elements there. Expanded sponsorships is where we're focusing a lot of our attention. Expense control and efficiency, as attested by the fact that we have more expense reductions than revenue declines, and that would lead to long-term financial stability. In terms of closing remarks, if and when you've got any additional questions, I will be here for the Q&A portion, and I'll be happy to field any questions from anyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Serge. Does any member have any questions that require clarification related specifically to the financial statements or the auditor's report? As Serge said, we can take questions, general questions, following the business portion of the meeting, but does anyone require any clarifications? Seeing none, thank you very much for your help, Serge.
Thank you.
Next, we move on to the appointment of auditors. I will take a motion now to appoint auditors for this current fiscal year. Do we have a motion? Your name, please, and your motion. Oh, sorry, just wait for the mic.
Thank you. My name is Judy Wolf. I move to appoint RSSM LLP, Chartered Professional Accountants, as auditors of the corporation to hold office until the close of the next annual general meeting of members or until a successor is appointed at such remuneration as may be fixed by the directors, and the directors are hereby authorized to fix such remuneration.
Thank you, Judy. Do we have a seconder for that motion?
It's Hubert Van Niekerk. I hereby second that motion.
Thank you, Hubert. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. Please vote now on motion number 2 using the poll function on your Zoom. And if you are in the audience, please raise your hand in favor. Any opposed? Any abstentions? See one hand abstaining. And online, please vote now. There's 2% opposed, 6% abstain, and 92% in favor. And with that, the motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to the exciting part now, the election of directors. The next item of business requires 3 positions to be filled according to our bylaws. I will now take a motion to appoint directors for the corporation. Who has our motion to appoint the directors? Daria in the front row of the back, please.
Can I get you to stand up? Stand up.
Okay. I May Chow,
I'll hold it.
sorry,
That's okay. I'll hold it. I'll hold it.
whole thing. Okay. I May Chow move to appoint Moses Zaimer, Maruha Gohan, and Carmen Ruti.
We have a motion before the floor. I will help out. I move to appoint Moses Neimer, Maura Cohen, and Carmen Ruiz Ilaza to the Board of Directors for a 2-year term from the date of appointment until a successor is elected or appointed. Do I have a seconder for that motion?
Erica Schmidt, I second the motion.
Thank you, Erica. On the motion to appoint Moses Neimer, Maura Cohen, and Carmen Ruiz Ilaza to the Board of Directors for a 2-year term from the date of appointment until a successor is elected or appointed, please vote now on the motion using the poll function online. And in the room, all in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? We'll look online. For your votes from home, we have 88% in favor, 4% opposed, and 7% are abstaining, and with that, the motion carries. Welcome, Carmen, to the board.
Thank you very much.
Moses Neimer, Maura Cohen, and Carmen Ruiz Ilaza are appointed to the Board of Directors for a 2-year term. I will now take a motion to approve the acts of all the directors and officers of the corporation for the past year. Who is helping us with that motion? Rudy in the back row. Rudy, 1 second for the mic, please.
Good afternoon, Rudy Sankovic. I move that the membership approve all the actions, including bylaws, resolutions, acts and proceedings of the directors and officers of the corporation made or taken since February 22nd, 2024, as the same are set forth and referred to in the minutes of the corporation or in the financial statements submitted to the members of the corporation on this date, are hereby approved, sanctioned, ratified, and confirmed.
That's a mouthful. Thank you, Rudy. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Just hang on for the mic there, sir. Thank you.
I'm Myron Lopchuk. I second that motion.
Thank you, Myron. There is a motion before the membership. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will now call the vote online. That's going to appear on your screen. Please vote for ratification of the actions of the officers and directors. In the room, all in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Abstentions? That looks like 88%, 86% in favor, 2% opposed, 11% abstain, and with that, the motion carries. Thank you. Well, this concludes the scheduled business of the annual general meeting. I will now open the floor to any new or other business any member of the corporation may have. Hearing none, I close the floor to new business. This concludes our business. I will now take a motion to conclude the annual general meeting. Do I have a motion to conclude? Oh, second row here, Daria.
Evelyn Dreyfus, and I move that the meeting be adjourned.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second of that motion? Thank you very much. We have a motion on the floor. Please vote now on motion number 5 using the poll function, the adjournment of our business meeting. In the room, all in favor to adjourn? Any opposed? Abstentions? Looks like we have unanimity on closing the meeting. That motion passes And the meeting is now concluded. Thank you very much for your help. So with that out of the way, that is the important rules and regulations we must follow as a not-for-profit corporation, federally registered. And we are delighted to have so many members participate here in person and online. And we had, like I said, almost 2,000 people who had sent their digital proxies into us. So thank you very much, everyone, for doing that. I believe it is now my pleasure and duty to introduce you to the president of CARP, Mr. Rudy Bouttignon.
Thanks, Anthony. Hey, good afternoon, everyone here and east of here, and to all of those members out west, good morning. It's great to be here. Thank you for coming out in this beautiful, balmy weather. I'm just telling my friends in Vancouver that it's actually not what they think it is. So thank you very much for coming. It's a really great day. I was curious why no one wanted the official business to continue, since it's so wonderful. But anyways, I'm really thrilled to be here today. I was just thinking, you know, these are just when you decide that these are crazy historic times, you know, when you decide, okay, this is it, I've never seen it crazier, it gets crazier still. You know, it's amazing what we're living through right now. And, but I'm reminded that as mostly seniors in this room, we've lived through a lot of crazy periods, ups and downs in the political, cultural, economic cycles. And what we've learned is it's important to stay well informed, don't panic, and as the Brits say, keep calm and carry on. And so we will. One of the great pleasures of being a member of CARP and working with the team here is meeting all our chapter volunteers right across the country, from St. John's, Newfoundland to Vancouver, to Victoria, Vancouver Island. It's really great to see our chapters made up of volunteers who commit their precious time to really evangelizing the message of the Canadian Association of Retired Person. And I want to recognize them because they're all online from coast to coast. I'm going to do a roll call starting from our #1 chapter from Newfoundland and Labrador based in St. John's to thank Sharon Callahan. In Nova Scotia, Ron Swan, based in Halifax. In Ottawa, Claude Paul Boivin. In the Greater Bay of Quinte, Louise War. And from Scarborough, nearby, Rudy Sankovic. Rudy's in the audience, and we saw him earlier. Thank you for making it to the studio. In Brampton, Larry Griffith. In Barrie, Gwen Kavanagh, and the co-chair, Tom Aldershaw, who's also here in the studio. Thank you, Tom. John Lindsay in Sudbury. Ruby Tour in Brantford. Murray Etherington in Mississauga. Tom Carruthers in Halton, Burlington. Ursula Hudson and Tom Broccolini representing the Niagara region out of St. Catharines. In London, St. Thomas, Gloria McKibben, and Larry Duffield in Windsor, Essex. Representing us in Manitoba from Winnipeg is Carmen Nedowin. In Saskatchewan, based in Regina, is Carrie Swan. Hello, Carrie. Welcome to your new role. In Alberta, from Calgary, Heather Harris. Thank you very much. And in British Columbia, my home province now, Rich Ulvild, representing us in White Rock, Surrey. Karina Stainsby, representing us in Vancouver. And Doug Jones in Vancouver Island, based in Victoria. Thank you very much to all of you. These are the people that connect with our members in their local communities, carrying the message for CARP, doing volunteer work to support the local community and helping better the lives of seniors. They are all volunteers, and I urge you, and those tuning in today, that if you want to get more involved in helping with the mission of CARP, that you connect with the local chapter. You can become involved as a board member or as a committee member, or just coming out to the special meetings that they have throughout the year. And that's where I've been to many of them, and they're a lot of fun. It's a great way to stay engaged with the community, and it's another way that we drive membership. So I encourage everyone to take some time out and check the chapter in your local area. Now, I'd also like to acknowledge the retirement of Bill Van Gorder from the National Office staff. Bill has given many years of great service to CARP, and of course, in typical Bill retirement fashion, because I think this is the 5th time he's retired from a job, he continues to serve CARP's mission as a member of the board of directors. He's an esteemed member of the Nova Scotia chapter, really getting our message there, and he'll continue to represent us from time to time. We'll call on his vast body of knowledge, and he'll represent us as the chief advocate emeritus. So, Bill, thank you very much. Round of applause to you. Thank you. Bill's been a great help to me personally as well, and trying to wrap my head around all the various policy issues that we deal with, because one thing that you learn about this job, and when it affects seniors, there's no end to the issues that we can tackle. And Bill has been a great resource for me personally. So thank you, Bill. I want to talk about one thing that you'll hear more about later with our speakers, and that's the persistence of ageism. You know, everyone feels it in different ways because it's right throughout the culture. But there was a particular issue that came up in October on the old age security. We've been pushing for an increase of 10% for seniors aged 65 to 74 to match the increase that was given to those that were 75 plus. The Bloc Québécois in Parliament saw it as an opportunity to bring it out and use it to try to bring down the government. And of course, that created a great amount of interest in the Ottawa press gallery, because that's what they're focused on. And I was invited to take part in a national radio debate. And it was quite interesting because I was pitted against an academic out of the University of British Columbia, who'll name nameless right now, unless Moses chooses to name him later, but an academic, very nice man. And he's been working on policy papers under the title of Generation Squeeze. He gets a regular platform in the Globe and Mail. And I'll summarize what the copious policy positions equal. The reason young people are having a tough time today is because the boomers, us, are hogging all the resources. And that's right. and it's one thing to hear it on a debate on the radio show, but you see it echoed over and over again in some of our national platforms. And it's no surprise, because if you're in the newsroom of a lot of these national platforms, the journalists are all young. And they are having their difficulties. They're having the difficulties with housing, raising families, all those issues that we ourselves have tackled in earlier times in our life. But the problem is that it pits generations against each other. We're talking actually about the children in your own family or the grandchildren in your own family. But there's this persistent idea that you can't be helping or improving the life of seniors without it detracting from another younger generation. And our position is to work together. The better our communities are, the better everyone is well off. Part of the spin of against old age security, for instance, and I'll speak to this in a second in terms of policy and advocacy, is that the governments seniors have never had it so well. They've never been better off, and that might be true for many, but not for a lot. And the official spin is that under the current government, the poverty rate of seniors is a little over 6%. The National Institute on Aging had an extensive survey that they released last month, a very extensive survey. And it actually found that seniors' poverty rates were more than double what the official government position is, at 14%. And what is the poverty that, again, people just over or at near the poverty line. And what is that poverty line? It's a political decision. There's no empirical, really, test of it. That poverty line is $26,000 a year. So if you're making slightly over $26,000 a year, you're doing fine, right? You can get by on that rent. That should cover the rent and groceries and insurance and taxes. Well, and one of the groups most affected in seniors' poverty is single women over 65. They are overrepresented in terms of poverty. And these official poverty rates don't take into account the special needs of older people, like mobility aids, medications, special assistant at home, the kind of things that you have to deal with as you age. And even when you think about the poverty line, that 14% are living at near or just above the poverty line at $26,000 a year. Is that your idea or our idea of aging with dignity? That's our mission, is to make sure that you're not just making do at the end of the month, but that you're actually living a full, dignified life. And so the reason that the attitudes like Generation Squeeze continue to get a lot of airplay is this generational, this ageism that pervades our society. Now, there's a federal election coming up soon. And you know, we've all been traumatized by the announcements from South about tariffs. But even before then, the economy's having trouble. We've got a lot of debt and deficit. There's more demand for health care, but there's less money in the till. And with a federal election soon to be at hand, I think there'll be a lot of pressure on deficit reduction. And one of those big targets, it's nice, big, fat, juicy, is old age security, and under the guise of generational fairness. So, in preparing for the next federal election, CARP has listed 5 top advocacy priorities for the coming year and for the governments that we face. And we hope that these are the top 5 priorities that our chapters and our volunteers press their local politicians with their concerns. So, CARP is advocating for more investment in home care and community care. And quite frankly, it's the future for the baby boomers. There is no way that institutions will be able to deal with the size of the aging population. And besides, survey after survey after survey, most people want to age at home, in their community. That's where they want to stay. So what does that mean? It does need more resources. It means more resources for the caregivers, essentially. The front line of home care is going to be caregivers, whether it's a family member, a neighbor, or whether it's a PSW, a personal service worker. Those are the people that we need. We need people to be able to go into home and help on a day-to-day basis. And it also helps fight the #1 issue of aging, which is loneliness, right? So having that human touch is going to be really important, something that technologies are not going to be able to address. And we know, again, we've done poll surveys, and it's something like 95, 96, 97% of where do you want to end your days at home, if possible. So we're going to call for more investment in home and community care. There are many solutions to housing for seniors, and there's a variety of them. They're as different as we are as people. People like living in different settings. Some people do like to live in retirement homes or in group settings. But I think my feeling is that we'll have to let 1,000 flowers bloom. Our Ottawa chapter's working on fall prevention. Hey, to stay at home, we ought to make sure you're not going to fall, because the smallest fall can lead to grave consequences. In Barrie, they're promoting the idea of a Golden Girls model. There are a lot of women, and it's mostly women, they want to still live together. They still want to own some property in their community. And so what are the kind of insurance issues and municipal zoning issues that make that happen? Again, letting 1,000 flowers bloom. Number 2, protection and strengthening of old age security. We feel that this is going to be a target for a government coming into power, because the aging population is going to put a strain on our economy. Right now, old age security is means tested. Depending on how much you make, you either get to keep the entire amount, or at $90,000 approximately, it starts to claw back the government until it gets to $130,000 approximately, and then you're cut off. And what you're going to hear in the press when people talk about means testing and about lowering the threshold, they're going to make a lot of hay on that $130,000. Is it right to be giving old age security pension to those making $130,000? But that's irrelevant, because if you're making $130,000, you're probably receiving a check for $2 a month. The real issue is at the lower end, those seniors that are most dependent on old age security. We want to see that strengthened, and again, we'll be pushing for increases to those 65 to 74 to match the increase given to 75-year-olds, because there shouldn't be two classes of seniors. Nothing says that if you're 65 or 75, your circumstances are any different, really. And we know that with old age security, what sounds like a good number at first, then you pay income tax on it, and then it's the cost of living. The cost of living has been digging away at people's savings. You hear from governments that we are now in a low inflation environment, and it's less. But all those price increases that grocery stores and everyone else added on during the inflationary period, they're still there. And the increases are continuing to go up. And it's shocking what a grocery bill looks like now compared to 5 years ago. So the cost of living has really threatened people's livelihood, particularly those dependent on old age security. Here's one that affects a lot of people. We've been promoting, advocating the end of mandatory withdrawal from RRIFs, RRIFs. That is basically drawing down from your RRSPs. The model that's currently in hand at age 71, you are mandated to start taking down payments from it, whether you need it or not at that moment. And this was based on the idea that people retired at 65 and that was it. But what we know is there is a large percentage of people who continue to work, either because they choose to and they love working, like me, or because they have to. And it doesn't make any sense for them to start taking down a retirement pension, mandatory withdrawal at age 71, when they might need it a bit later on. The good news here is a government coming into power can make that change right away and have an appreciable, measurable result right away within people's pockets. And the good news for government is eventually the government will get its tax money at the end of the day. So it doesn't add to the deficit. That's number 3. Number 4, frauds and scams. We want to go beyond education to see the implementation of enforcement and an attempt to actually retrieve some of this money. And my colleague Anthony likes to bring up an example that I think illustrates the priorities that we sometimes have for our law enforcement. There was a $20 million gold heist from Air Canada about a year and a half ago. Does anybody remember that? $20 million. Police forces around the world were immediately engaged in trying to track down what happened, who did it, and try to retrieve the money for a $20 million gold heist. And yet each year Canadians lose $9 billion through frauds and scams. And the best we've been able to get from government is just be aware. And I think that this is very, very important, much more important today than it's ever been, because most of us have gone online on the internet, mostly through mobile phones. And whether you were online or not before the pandemic, after the pandemic, governments basically forced us all online, because if you want to get any kind of timely service, you've got to go online and book. And so with more and more seniors being online, they're more susceptible to frauds and scams. And now with artificial intelligence being able to fake a loved one's voice becomes much more of a threat. So we want to see government doing a lot more in enforcement and redress. And number 5, expert recommended vaccinations, free for all. You know, I'm looking at the age of most of us here. I'm from that polio vaccine discovery vaccination era. Any other one else here? Remember polio vaccine? Remember? I remember in school when it came out and they announced the vaccination day and people couldn't get into lineups quick enough, kids, right? Because we'd seen what the terror of polio was. And oh my God, there was this miracle, vaccination for polio. And people got it and we defeated vaccines. And I'm still amazed at this time. We've got the new health secretary in the United States, who you know about has particular views. I guess he hasn't heard of, leeches and bloodletting, you know. I think that's what we might be getting to. But we receive at our offices every day comments from conspiracy theorists about promoting vaccines. You know, that's some great plot, and I'm reading it, and I think these people are perfectly normal, I think. Anyways, we're promoting expert-recommended vaccinations for certain age groups that are recommended for certain age groups to be free. But I think that we need to go beyond that, and that all vaccinations should be free, because a vaccinated person makes a vaccinated community, right? We know how vaccinations work. You have to have that herd immunity. There has to be enough of us vaccinated to prevent these things from spreading. We're seeing the result of vaccine deniers with the rise of measles all of a sudden. Measles. I thought we got rid of measles, you know, and so that's a really key priority for us going forward. Now, we've had some historic successes in the past with CARP because of our strength in numbers, because we've had so many members representing Canadians from coast to coast. We've been able to get politicians to make changes. So our historic successes, ending mandatory retirement at age 65, increases to old age security and the guaranteed income supplement. We've advocated and got income splitting for couples that helps their tax burden. And we were one of the big promoters of an independent Canada pension plan arm, so that our retirement pension plan is managed by professionals and not mucked about by politicians wanting to win the next election. So those are big historic successes. This past year, we've had a couple of noticeable successes. One was enlarging the scope of practice for pharmacists, letting pharmacists across the country do those kind of routine things that really doesn't take a doctor to do. And that helps relieve the pressure on an overburdened healthcare system. But the other major significant program that was announced here last year by the seniors minister, the former seniors minister, was the introduction of a national dental care program. And that's been a really positive development for millions of Canadians. It's far from perfect, and we're still on the case making sure that it's implemented across the country much better than it is now, but it's a big start, and that's thanks to, again, the strength in numbers. We have more work to do, and we need more members to do that. So we've developed a strategic plan pointing our strategic direction of joining the movement, trying to get people to join up. And we're going to do that, one, by enhancing the value of membership, enhancing advocacy by amplifying it to the key decision makers, by increasing our benefits so they're available to members right across the country. We've been strengthening our community through our chapters, by supporting our chapters who are actually connected to our members on the ground, so they see a tangible person behind CARP. And a communications hub. Our future direction is to be a communications hub on our website that becomes the go-to hub for all things seniors. If you're looking for things even on a federal or provincial government website, for something you've heard announced, so you've got the minister's name, you've got the program that's been announced, trying to find it is really, really difficult. So we want to create an information hub where seniors can come to every day to find out the essential information they need to make life better. We need to grow our numbers. We need to add, we've done a decent job this year. We've added 40,000 new members over the course of the year. That's brought us to about 250,000 members, but we need to have more members. We're doing several marketing initiatives that you'll hear about in the coming weeks. We're also promoting group memberships where there's large like-minded groups of seniors where we're offering introductory membership to see how they enjoy the benefits and add to their voice, to add their voices to our advocacy. So we're doing large group membership drives. You've seen part of the refresh and relaunch the brand by proclaiming ourselves as a movement that our mission is to change society's views on ageism, and that's gradually being introduced. And fourth, something we're nearly complete on doing, rebuilding the national office to improve operations and support our chapter volunteers. And we've done that with more funding, more communications to the chapters, and more policy support. But those chapters needs volunteers to do their work. We're looking at restarting chapters in Regina, Kingston, and Toronto, surprisingly. So we're open for more volunteers. Now, let me talk about the CARP branding on a general basis and the persistence of ageism. You know, ageism is essentially a cultural issue. You don't have these kind of attitudes when you go to certain Asian countries that I've done regular work in, like in South Korea or Taiwan or Japan. But we do have it in North America. And so our mission really is to change society's views of and treatment of older adults. And we can do that by starting to own the language, right? I've talked to members across the country on several occasions, and I know that people are still reluctant sometimes, many people, to call themselves seniors. You know, take a guess. You know, you're not a young kid anymore. They been often referred to as elderly instead of the more proper title as an elder. You know, in certain societies, an elder is a very esteemed individual. If you look at the signs on the subway, it says, "Make way for the elderly." I hate that. And retirement. Some people says, I don't really want to, you know, call myself retired because I'm not really retired. I've never been busier than ever. Well, that happens to be the truth for everybody. Everyone I've talked to say the same. It's a cliche. How did I ever manage to do what I'm doing now when I had a full-time job? You know, I've got my friends, my book club, I've got the grandkids I look after, I've got, you know, we've been busy. So everyone knows that retirement is a stage in your work life, in that we understand it to be you've retired from that thing you had to do when you had to raise a family, pay the mortgage, you know, carry on life. And that retirement means you no longer have to do that. You're now enjoying life. So we need to own that language. We're seniors. We're elders, you know, we're retired, you know, retired from work. I think that's you know, what we have to do ultimately is to change that culture. So we've been successful at making change with politicians, because the one thing politicians listen to is numbers, right? And it's our strength in numbers that give us the power to make change. Not changes that happen overnight, but cumulatively over time, year after year. So I encourage you to look at a chapter, join up, encourage your friends and neighbors to become members of CARP. Give us a contact, you know, contact us if you need help with our membership brochures that we can hand out to you or direct you to a website. But again, it's the strength in numbers. And as a friend told me once about our strength in numbers, about seniors, he said, you know, we're old, we're cranky, and we vote. And that's our strength. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for supporting CARP as a member, supporting CARP as a chapter volunteer. And I'm going to stick around to the end, after the end, if anyone wants to come up and talk to me. But otherwise, I want to thank you very much for your attention. And now let's bring back Anthony Quinn. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rudy. CARP is certainly going in the right direction under your leadership. Thank you very much for your comments today. So now it's time to introduce our keynote speakers. And for those of you who have joined our CARP annual general meetings in the past, we have typically invited politicians, giving them the opportunity to state their case for their policies and platforms aimed at older adults, at senior citizens in Canada. And we have had recent guests, including Seamus O'Regan last year, the Minister of Seniors at the time. The year previous, we had the Ontario Premier, who's up for re-election today, Mr. Doug Ford. We've had Andrew Scheer, Jagmeet Singh, Justin Trudeau, Thomas Mulcair, and we've had Wes Sheridan, former PEI Finance Minister, and Dwight Duncan, who was the Ontario Finance Minister at the time. And a few years ago, we actually had a comedian. We decided to go with a comedian. But this year, due to the happenings in Ottawa and the election in Ontario, the thought was to invite two of the provincial seniors advocates who do a similar job to what we do at CARP, but they do it in a professional office with staff, and they have a legislative connection to their governments. So we have invited Ms. Susan Walsh, the seniors advocate from Newfoundland and Labrador, and Mr. Dan Levitt, the seniors advocate from British Columbia, to join us today. So I'm going to read their bios, their introductions first, and then I'll ask them to speak, first Susan and then Dan, and then we'll be together on the stage for a little chat and your questions. So I want to welcome Susan Walsh. She has over 30 years experience in various capacities working in the social system in Newfoundland and Labrador. She began her career as a social worker in community development, and she proceeded to work through progressive leadership positions with numerous departments in the provincial government of Newfoundland and Labrador, focused on mental health, geriatrics, disabilities, and child welfare and income support. In recognition of her leadership, Ms. Walsh was nominated on 2 separate occasions by her peers for the Public Service Award of Excellence. As an executive within the provincial government, Ms. Walsh led a number of reform initiatives and represented on various provincial and national boards. Her most recent role prior to her appointment as the seniors advocate in June 2022 was the Deputy Minister of the Department of Children, Seniors and Social Development. And I will also introduce you to Dan Levitt, the BC Seniors Advocate. Dan has tirelessly championed the rights of seniors for 30 years at the provincial, national, and international levels. Prior to his appointment as BC Seniors Advocate, Dan held leadership positions in senior living and long-term care homes in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia for more than 10 years, and where he helped shape dementia-friendly future for seniors and their loved ones. He was an adjunct professor of gerontology, both at Simon Fraser University, and a former sessional instructor at BC Institute of Technology. He's also been a surveyor and with Accreditation Canada, reviewing quality improvement and person-centered care at long-term care homes and community-based care providers. And I also want to add that he's inspired in his journey to support aging by his grandparents and great-grandparents, and he's now supporting his own parents who are living their life to their fullest in their mid-80s. So please welcome Ms. Susan Walsh, the Newfoundland and Labrador Seniors Advocate.
Horizontally challenged. Well, thank you, Anthony, for the lovely introduction, and thank you to everyone here today for the interest in hearing from myself and my esteemed colleague from British Columbia. I'm very interested to know that a colleague, fellow Newfoundlander and Labradorian, was the speaker last year, Seamus O'Regan. I hope you will find that my presentation may be a little different than his. I'm not a government employee. I am an independent advocate who reports to the House of Assembly. So all parties of the government of Newfoundland and Labrador elect, vote on who will be the seniors advocate for the province, and my legislation makes me independent. So I always say when I meet with seniors, there's 2 things you need to know. The first one is you pay my salary, so you need to make sure I'm doing what you need me to do. And the second one is that not only should I be representing you publicly and saying what needs to be said, but my legislation says I must. So if I don't, then that's grounds for you getting me removed. So I try to stay firm to that because I feel the position is very important. And I want to do it justice. Okay, so I have the pleasure of starting this, and Dan's going to bring it all together at the end. Ageism is very important in Canada, and interestingly enough, Dr. Robert Butler coined this term 60 years ago. He was a geriatrician in the United States, and he basically likened it to bigotry. And it's somewhat disheartening, really, that we're here 60 years later still talking about this. It really says that exactly what all the research and literature says, that it is the most prominent type of ism, and it's so accepted. It's just accepted. And unfortunately, ageism against seniors is the most common type and has the most significant impact. And so it's for that reason that we're going to focus today, acknowledging that ageism affects many different age groups, young people, older people, but we're going to focus on seniors today because ageism in seniors has such a significant impact. And I think it's important for us to also note that ageism can be conscious or unconscious. So, conscious ageism, things like, I know, Rudy, you spoke about reporters. So recently I released a report with recommendations, and there was a younger gentleman who was a reporter, and he said to me, Susan, how are we going to afford all this? All of, us young people, how are we going to afford to pay for all these recommendations you're making for seniors? And, to me, that was conscious ageism. He knew what he was saying. He understood that, he was saying that seniors aren't giving to the economy anymore. We have to pay for all this stuff for you folks who are getting older. And of course, once I calmed down and I didn't smack him, I wanted to, I thought, I looked at him and I said, well, seniors, in case you didn't know, are still paying taxes. And not only they pay that, they pay taxes a lifetime. And did your father work? Did your grandfather work? Are they still working? Did your grandmother work? Did your parents? Think about what you're saying here. So, I took an opportunity to educate him. He did pull in his horns a little, but he still wanted the question answered, at any rate. And then, of course, we have unconscious ageism, things like, we say it ourselves. Gee, she looks great for her age. Or, gosh, Mister is really doing well. Like, he remembers things really well. Gee, I'm surprised given how old he is. Like those kind of things that we don't even think about, but it's ageism. Okay, so I'm supposed to work these. Green. Sorry, I should have had that one up. Let's go again. So, the World Health Organization, WHO, they certainly define what ageism is, and it's things like stereotypes, basically generalized beliefs about certain age groups. And so it might be things like, oh, all old people are frail, or all old people are not productive, they're just home, watching TV, that kind of thing. It could be a prejudice, things like having negative feelings about certain groups, like I really don't think our healthcare dollars in research should be spent on older people because, isn't that wrong? We should be spending on younger people. Older people had a lifetime. They've lived their lives, that kind of thing. And then we have things like discrimination. So, unfair treatment. And we certainly see that in the environment on employment, that older people are certainly less likely to be employed than younger people, unfortunately. And then we have self-directed ageism, and that's not really an area we think about a whole lot. Things like, we look at ourselves and think negatively about ourselves because we're getting older. Oh, I'm really too old to start exercising at this point, or I forgot to take my pills this morning, but I'll be darned, I'm not telling my children because they'll think I'm starting to lose it. And then they'll be looking for a home to put me in. Those kind of, thinking about yourself in a negative light versus lots of people forget things. This self-directed ageism is concerning because it can lead to a situation where we really move toward risky behavior. So rather than exercising or rather than quitting smoking or things like that, well, I'm just getting older. It really isn't necessary at my age in life. I think one of the things from the WHO research that's really stood out for me is that 1 in 2 people are ageist. 1 in 2 people. Now think about that. That means half the doctors, half the nurses, half the social workers, half the teachers, half the. Like, and I know I'm generalizing, but when you think it's 50%, well, it tells you a lot about ageism is alive and well in our healthcare system. And so we see it in our healthcare system. I'm sure many of you have things like, doctors not explaining, what's happening to someone well, or maybe talking to their adult child. Things like you go to tell your doctor that I've had a new circumstance. I feel pain here, or something's going on with me, and they look at you and go, "You're 80." Like that happens when you're 80, and not really paying attention to it in the right way. Questioning seniors when they say, "Yeah, I've got cancer. Is there a treatment?" Well, there is, but at your age, do you want to go through it? Well, yeah, if it's going to extend my life, potentially. No, I mean, obviously some seniors wouldn't choose that, and that's their prerogative, but it should be their prerogative. Ageism shouldn't stand in the way of that. Okay, so let's talk internationally. So if you look at some data that the Commonwealth Fund reports, and Commonwealth Fund is a US-based foundation, and they sample people 65 plus in 11 wealthy nations. Canada turns out that it's 8th to last in what seniors have reported in terms of how the healthcare system addresses their needs and how their providers address their needs. If that's not ageist, I'm not sure what is. And what's most concerning to me, and I know Rudy talked about social isolation, that social isolation, we rank the highest in the 11 countries that are surveyed. I mean, this is not even, you can't explain this away by we can't get doctors or nurses. This is purely a policy decision around not putting the resources into community where seniors need activity and age-friendly communities, able to get out into your community, able to be engaged. I'm running out of time. I'm going to have to fast forward a little. So the Canadian Coalition on Ageism, which I know Dan and I are certainly members of, they have determined that they've done a survey, and in their survey of 1,000 seniors, 1,000 people, 25 plus, they've determined that 54% of the people surveyed, they were familiar with the concept. Now remember, 1 in 2 people, 50%, are ageist. We know that. 54% were familiar with the concept, but nearly 90% said that they failed to grasp the widespread prevalence of ageism. And that's significant because if we don't recognize it's a problem, we're not going to fix the problem. And so it comes out in healthcare in these kind of ways. We see that 9.7% of new long-term care admissions in this country are unnecessary. They're unnecessary. We don't need it to happen. It's due to a lack of supports and services in the community. Ageism. The median days that Canadian seniors end up in hospital because they have nowhere to go or services to meet their needs until those things can get put in place is 9 days, and that's median. So that's not average. So some of those days could be well over 9. But 9 days sitting in an ALC bed and losing capacity is significant for an older person. 25% of residents in long-term care were given antipsychotic drugs when they really didn't need them. That's alarming to me, and the numbers in Newfoundland and Labrador are even higher. It's on my list as an issue that we're really digging into. And why aren't we hearing about this? Why isn't this becoming a massive issue that needs to be resolved? One would question, again, the issue of ageism. Why is it being provided? Why are we getting these medications in the first place then when we don't need them? And I talk about home care. So in most provinces in this country, you have a copay for your home care. Some do get it free, and I'm envious. But in Newfoundland and Labrador, the lowest income seniors have to pay. So at 64, if you're on income support, your home care is free. You don't have a copay. The day you turn 65, somehow overnight before your birthday, you became rich, and now you have a copay. Well, guess what happens? A lot of seniors don't pay for it. They don't get the home support because they can't afford the copay. So, it's another example from my perspective of ageism in the healthcare system. And we just need to look at the ratio of gerontologists to pediatricians to see the misbalance in the healthcare system. So, one last thing I wanted to show you. So 3 of the most common surgeries in the healthcare system for people 65 plus are cataract, hip and knee, and joint replacement. And those surgeries, when we looked at the data on it, well, though less than, if you see there, less than 70% or so are now at a range where they're meeting the benchmark timeframes. Only 70%. And a lot of people will say, well, Susan, that's because COVID, and everything gets blamed on COVID. Well, COVID was 3 years ago, and we're still not up to pre-COVID range. So, okay, we could let that go, but just look at the trend. Even before COVID, it was on a downward trend. So those surgeries that seniors need to be healthy and active in their communities were already not meeting the benchmark. And year over year, they were less and less meeting the benchmark. So, you know, we can't blame it on COVID. Okay, so what's the relevance of all this? And I've got 3 minutes left, and this is my last slide, so I'm doing well. So what's the relevance of all this? Ageist views lead to poor health outcomes. Confirmed. There's no arguing it. The literature well proves it out. And so, as a consequence, if we have ageist views, we're not going to see a change in the system. We're going to see things like life-sustaining treatments are not going to be provided to older people. There's already lots of age-based exclusions on things like clinical trials. On research projects that would look at, positive treatments for a certain, diseases and such. Age restrictions. They're not looking at older people for these things. In long-term care, I mean, we already know the quality and oversight is concerning. There's no dignity in the long-term care system, and it needs to be replaced. And so things like, I'll give you an example. It's the one that really was the most heart-wrenching for me. I had a gentleman. He had been a fisherman and a little rough around the edges. And he was telling me I was doing consultations, and he was telling me, I brought my mom to the long-term care facility. He said for her initial assessment, and the person kept talking to me, and Mom reached over and said, Mom, I need to use the washroom. And the lady heard her, and she said, why don't you just use your diaper? And he started to cry telling this story. And I mean, I tried not to. It was hard. But at the end of the day, there's no dignity. There's no dignity in the system. And remember, 50% of us are ageist. We're in all walks of life, serving all sorts of positions. There's no individualism. So everybody eats at the same time. Everyone goes to bed at the same time. There's no individualism. And there's certainly no prevention. What's some of the biggest concerns we hear? No dental care, limited in terms of eyeglasses and those kind of things when you're in a long-term care facility. And I'm not trying to, there's lots of good long-term care facilities, I'm sure, but it's not the prevalence. And so as a consequence, we know that there's ageism in the system, and I haven't even talked about COVID and the impacts of long-term care. So we also know that this is really relevant from a deficiencies perspective, from available resources. So we know right off the bat, young people today do not want to work in geriatrics. It's not an area of choice. And so this is creating a problem for us from a career perspective and having enough resources in the system. And so we hear, and I've heard from lots of nurses and people in that health field say, it's not a valued area of specialty, Susan, and, you lose some of your skills in that area. Well, we've got to turn that around, don't we? Because that's not how it should be. And it's going to create a problem in terms of available resources. And, of course, the biggest issue for me in terms of the impact from a health systems perspective is it's also not allowing for good research on what are the best practice models. What should it look like? So, until policymakers, service providers, professionals acknowledge ageism and institutional ageism, we're really not going to recognize the changes that are necessary. And last bullet there, I think, is the critical element. So Yale did some research on this, and they tried to really look at, well, what's the cost of ageism in the health system? And for them, it was $63 billion in a year. I would love to see this replicated in Canada, because we know it's costing money, because people are getting sicker without the services they need, and then their service becomes more costly when they have to receive it. And so I'll clue it up there. I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity, and certainly stick around for questions afterwards.
Thank you for the introduction, Anthony, and Susan, for those words. I'm blessed to be able to work with a colleague from Newfoundland Labrador who's really been doing some important work in your province, advocating for seniors and really putting out some important reports that has helped to influence legislation and the way seniors enjoy their lives. And I want to make sure I'm recognizing the important work of CARP. When you think about how CARP has really put a spotlight on seniors right across the country. And I know every month I look forward to my copy of Zoomer magazine. And the idea for me when I think about CARP and I think about all the advocacy work, and I've learned a lot of this in my role as BC Seniors Advocate working with local chapters, of how important some of the advocacy work that you're doing is, and I certainly see it in British Columbia. But when I think about CARP and the media presence that you have, you really have changed the way people think about aging. That next birthday is a good thing, that we should be celebrating and owning our wrinkles if we choose to, and even the color of our hair, and that we shouldn't be hiding necessarily our age and celebrating who we are. And on a personal note, I'm a runner, so I look forward to that next big birthday, because that next big birthday, I might have a better chance of hitting the podium on race day. Now, as Susan was mentioning about ageism in healthcare, I have my own story. At one of those races, I tried to win my age category and ended up injuring my knee along the way, my right knee. And when I went to see my doctor, and he told me what was going wrong, he says, "Dan, it's just a sign of you getting older." And I said, "Well, if that's the case, how come my left knee isn't injured also?" It's okay to be old. It's okay to continue working when you're old. Just ask the Rolling Stones. At 80 years old, Ronnie and Mick and Keith are selling out and stadiums across the world. So we've changed, you've changed what it means to grow old. I'm going to focus on ageism in particular. So aging is not the problem. Ageism is. Aging's not the problem. Ageism is. I'm going to focus on employment and also in housing and where we see ageism. So one of the areas is that older workers, when they hit a certain age at 65, they lose benefits. And we could blame it on the benefit provider, but the employer is the one who contracts with that benefit provider. So we're looking into this in British Columbia, whether it's whatever levels of government or whatever contract the person has, but it could be a teacher, it could be the paramedic, it could be the person who delivers your mail, it could be the person who is collecting your garbage. Are they getting benefits past 65? So if you think about it, at 64 you get some benefits, and then the person in the cubicle next to you who's over 65, if they continue working, they lose benefits. So what we see is things like long-term disability. That's there for you if you can no longer do your job because of a health reason or perhaps mental health challenges of continuing to work. We also see things like life insurance stopping at 65. As well as things like accidental death and dismemberment benefits. So if this is not age discrimination, I'm not sure what is, because at one particular age, you lose a benefit. So we want to see that as there's more older workers and as younger people will have to work longer in order to pay off their debt. In terms of mortgages, the cost of living has gone up, and so we're going to expect to see people working in the workplace longer, and we've got to change the way our workplaces are designed. Also, when we see things like pensions, if you're lucky enough to have a workplace pension, especially if you're working for government, how do we celebrate your 70th birthday, well, you can no longer contribute to that pension, and we no longer will match your pension. So a 72-year-old worker is actually less expensive for the employer than somebody under 65. We think that's also age discrimination. And so we want to make sure that governments and employers are aware that older workers are not treated the same way as younger workers. We think by definition this is age discrimination. When we also look at things like the RIF, and I know that CARP has been advocating for this for many years, at 71, you have to turn your RSP into a RIF and to start drawing it down. And in concept, the RSP it's a tax deferral plan so that you're paying taxes later on when your income is less. And government has calculated this, the actuary have looked at this and understood what future taxes are coming through from retired people. But again, what if you don't have to take that income? What if you have other plans? And certainly with aging and with longevity, our life expectancies are going up in Canada. So we should be able to continue to enjoy our lifestyle. And if you want to convert your RSP into a RIF, it shouldn't be determined by a certain age. It should be based on your choice. So we're certainly agreeing with the critics to see that these age limitations be abolished altogether. So in housing, shifting from employment to housing, what we've seen in British Columbia is there's generally for services, there's more seniors, and while there's more investment, the investment is not keeping pace with older people. And I want to be clear on something. This is where we have conversations around the silver tsunami and apocalyptic demography. And if that's not ageism, I'm not sure what is. Blaming seniors for using too much resources and for the situation we're in. So we've known about the generation demographic for many years, and we certainly don't think, unlike a tsunami, which is violent and unpredictable, we don't think seniors are violent. So this is more of a gray wave, and it's really how do we respond to this aging demographic. So when we look at seniors subsidized housing, last year in British Columbia, 14,000 people applied for spaces. Unfortunately, under 1,000 of those people got a space. So approximately 6% were successful. That means 94% of people who applied did not get affordable housing. And we're simply not keeping pace with the demand for affordable housing, and we need to invest more. When we think about housing, 1 in 5 British Columbians who's a senior rents. So if you can't get affordable housing, then you're getting a subsidy called SAFER, which is a subsidy for low-income renters. And unfortunately, it's woefully inadequate. The goal of the program is that 30% of your income is spent on rent. And for the majority of people who are participating and eligible for the SAFER program, they're not hitting it. The maximum or the average rent subsidy that people are getting is approximately $192 a month. And when you think about how much rents are in metropolitan areas like Toronto, certainly in Vancouver, people are paying far too much money for rent, and the subsidy really is falling short of what we expect. So we need to see much more investment in both the subsidies for seniors for housing and also more investment for affordable housing, which isn't just a provincial responsibility, it also rolls up to federally to make sure that housing is a priority going forward for seniors who are going to be needing more places to live. So I want to just thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation with Susan and Anthony, and looking forward to hearing from the audience today with your questions. Thank you so much.
Come on over here, have a seat, and we'll have a chat. And this, am I okay on the left? Yeah. This is the opportunity now for those in the audience to get your questions together. And if you're listening on Zoom, in the chat function, you can write your question down, and my colleague Siobhan is monitoring those, and she will read them out as they come in, particularly as themes are developing. Thank you very much for coming, all the way from Newfoundland and Labrador, all the way from British Columbia. CARP can often be seen as being Toronto-centric by our members who live north of Steeles Avenue sometimes. And the idea to have you both here today is to say, listen, we are a national organization. We are concerned about issues from coast to coast to coast and what's happening at the bottom of the border as well. But I wanted to ask you about your roles today and how perhaps other provinces may want to emulate having an advocate like yourself. So Susan, could you tell us a bit about your role in relation to the government and how the position came to be?
So the position was created in 2017, and it was really tied to an election promise. So the Liberal government of the day had known that British Columbia had a seniors advocate, and so they made a commitment to the seniors of the province they would create one. And so they did, and 2018 the advocate was in place, and which was my predecessor. I'm the second in the province. And so I'm pleased that the structure of the office is such that, from a relationship to government, that when I applied on the position, I left government because I had 32 years in government, and I'm no longer a government employee. So I'm independent in that I report to the Speaker of the House of Assembly. The legislation clearly states that I'm not a government employee and that I'm protected to say what needs to be said on behalf of seniors related to government. And so while we keep a very positive relationship with government, sometimes there's a little push and pull because we are absolutely pointing out, regardless of who's in power, what seniors need and where they're not meeting it.
When the discussion about seniors advocates came up years ago, CARP has been talking about these issues, and our members, I think in Newfoundland and Labrador and in BC prior, were advocating to have this type of position. But we were of two minds. Is it better to have a minister of seniors who is sitting at the cabinet table advocating to his colleagues or his or her colleagues around the caucus table saying, this is important for us to get votes from seniors, or is it better to have an independent voice like an advocate, Dan, who has the ear of the legislature but isn't at the table?
I like to see both. When you think about what Susan and myself do, what our offices do, is that we look at an issue that's systemic, that's affecting seniors, whether it's housing, with transportation, healthcare, income, or community supports. And we look at it systemically, and we can see that one particular issue is having an impact on seniors right across the province. And then we can review that issue and make recommendations to the government, and often say things that are uncomfortable if you're inside government, to call out essentially the policies of your party. So we're able to look at something that affects seniors, whether it's rent subsidies that seniors are getting or not getting enough of, whether it's access to healthcare or long-term care, and we can call this out and say we have to do better and make recommendations to government and try to hold them account for those recommendations. And there are budgets that come along with your offices that allow you to connect with the community as well as have staff, and you're able to collect these reports and present them. Is it enough funding that you're getting from the province?
Well, there could always be more funding, certainly, but in an environment where it's tight, I think we make do with what we have quite well. We actually, one of the largest parts of our budget is on accessing community, being able to get out there, transportation, communications, and so I'm averaging about 25 communities a year, which is pretty significant with our geography, and meeting with thousands of seniors on a regular basis. So I think it's working. I think seniors are feeling in our province that they are having a voice. And then we also partner a lot with community organizations. Your branch, CARP, in Newfoundland and Labrador, Sharon Callahan and all of the executive there, we meet regularly, and other groups like yours to ensure that I'm hearing what the issues of all seniors and groups are, and that where there's areas where we can partner, we do.
In Ontario, there's been some resistance to having a seniors advocate. Manitoba recently had an election, and one of our chapter in Manitoba had made that their priority, and it was promised and soon to be delivered by the new NDP government there. Do you think there's a reluctance amongst more conservative-minded governments to establish this office? And are they not seeing the value in hearing from their constituents, Dan?
Well, I think it's awkward when you have an independent officer who's able to make reports to government and including recommendations that sometimes put pressure on government to spend more money on seniors or to change a policy that may be helping one particular group of people but hindering the well-being of seniors. So to the extent that there's a willingness to improve the quality of life for seniors and making sure that seniors' rights and aging matters are important to all citizens of that province, I think it behooves all government to consider a role like this for all 13 jurisdictions in our country.
Some of the pushback against an office like a seniors advocate is that it's another report that sits on the shelf and the politicians are not required to take action. How can perhaps the advocate's office themselves, or how can you encourage folks like CARP members to ensure that the policies and the perhaps flaws in the system that you are pointing out can be pushed along by voters themselves?
So in our province, one of the techniques that I implemented 3 years ago now is we do an actual report card for government. So we release a report every year that says, here's all our recommendations and here's the status of, did government meet them? Are they somewhere along the way, or have they not touched them? And so we make that very public, and the media has been very much on it. I do lots of interviews around it, so the pressure comes to bear in a big way. And if you look at our most recent report, we are seeing some really positive response from government on the needs of seniors and getting those recommendations across the line. So that's one definite way. And every time I meet with seniors, I say to them, you may feel you don't have a voice, because I hear that a lot, but you are the voice. You're the voters. And in a province like ours, where 50% of the province, just about 47.4, is 50 plus, seniors actually have the opportunity to change anything they wish to change from a political perspective. So, yeah, no, that's definitely, I feel that we're seeing some real gains.
And what about the regional differences? You're on one coast, you're on the other. How do you see, Dan, the differences between what might be happening in Newfoundland and Labrador with a little older population, with a lower income population compared to BC? What are some of the differences?
Well, I think if you look across Canada, you'll see pockets where seniors certainly are not enjoying the same quality of life as other people in urban areas who are employment age, who are enjoying the fruits of their labor working now, and for whatever reason, unfortunately in Canada, the median income, for example, in British Columbia for a senior is $34,000 a year, and a quarter of the people who in British Columbia, so 25% of seniors in British Columbia are living on less than $24,000 a year. And when you start thinking about the cost of medicine or medications, and you think about accommodation, their rental, et cetera, there's some big challenges around affordability, and we're seeing more and more pressures on seniors, especially when we think about the inflation. And I know in Newfoundland Labrador, speaking to Susan, the average or the median income in Newfoundland Labrador is much lower than it is in British Columbia.
In the country.
So your predecessor, Isabel Mackenzie, was quite active in the province. I'm sure you are too, visiting our chapters. What are you hearing from the grassroots now, and what are some of the wins that your offices have had over the term of yourself and with Isabel?
Well, I think it's what Isabel did and what our office has done, I know Susan's office is also making the same kind of impact, is putting that spotlight on seniors and having government prioritizing the needs of seniors. So for example, when you think about when you're born, there's a suite of vaccinations that are available to children. The same kind of suite should be available for seniors. So there should be access to RSV, to pneumococcal, to the influenza vaccination, to shingles especially, and of course to COVID. So we want to make sure that things like that are included in the budgets and made available free to seniors right across the country, as well as things like the co-payment for home support. For a senior right now in British Columbia who's living on $30,000 a year, they're going to spend $9,000 for 1 hour of home support for the year. So now they're at the 25th percentile or lower of income earners over 65, and they start looking at things like long-term care as a better option in terms of affordability. So we need to make sure that policies aren't having unintended consequences for seniors to age in the community of choice.
So there's a moral case to be made as well, not just a cynical, if you don't make these changes, you might be harmed at the ballot box. It's the right thing to do. How would you see your role as not really convincing voters, but convincing the government that it's the right thing to do?
So, you know, yes, it absolutely is the right thing to do, and I think the literature and research is one way to do that. I think, you know, this year we just released our first status around seniors in Newfoundland and Labrador. So how are they doing on a number of key indicators? And it's that research that will help, I am hopeful, people who are in decision-making positions in government realize, oh, wow, we didn't realize this, or we, you know, make those decisions for the right reasons. But, you know, I think there's an important role that comes with these positions, that if you're not making the decisions for the right reasons, then at least make them because you're forced to make them. I don't really personally care why.
As long as it happens.
You're right.
Sure. Daria, can we see if there's a question from the audience here in person now, or if there's one coming online? Well, I see that Siobhan might have the first question online.
I do. Cynthia Payne wrote this: for communities that have a large seniors population and are working together to help people stay in their homes longer, is there a branch of government that provides grants to subsidize help and activities on that front?
When I meet with seniors groups around British Columbia, and I spent a lot of time on the road when I first got the job in the spring of last year, and met in small communities in the north and in the eastern part of our country, in remote areas, in our province, I heard firsthand about seniors organizations struggling because they have to apply every year for grants. Sometimes the grants might be 2 or 3 years, but every year they're trying to apply. So there are some government programs that are supporting those organizations, but there just isn't enough because demand is going up, and the funding isn't keeping pace with the amount of services that are needed for those seniors.
Well, if I can add to that, because another question came in just talking about the Immigration and Refugee Commission introducing a home care support work program. But the issue is the co-pays that you were talking about before. First of all, just navigating the system of how you get access to those, and then, you know, reaching that mark where it's a co-pay system. So what can be done by us and them?
Yeah, and I'm not really sure which province this person is in, because it would be different province to province in terms of what might be available, given it's more so a provincial than a federal responsibility. But yeah, I mean, if we definitely need to see more resources at the community level, because that is how we're going to address the issues of age-friendly communities and ensuring that people can age well in whatever the right environment in their community might be. And I know in my province, one of the areas that we've certainly encouraged and government is doing is a review of all of their grant programs. So there is a department, 2 departments, three really, I suppose, if I think about it, that provide grants at the community level. It's not well organized, and so we're encouraging government to finalize their review and start looking at who's getting what resources, and commit to multi-year funding, because that's the other problem for community organizations. They get 1-year funding, they get to the end of the year, they don't know if they're going to get additional funding, and they end up, you know, having to lay off staff. It just puts then they're months trying to get everything back up and running and available again. So yeah, there's a lot of issues there that need to be resolved.
Susan, that reminds me of the siloing of all these services that are still going to one individual, one group of people. We have social services ministries, we have ministries of health, ministries of finance, ministries of long-term care. Are we finding that governments are too siloed when it comes to delivering services to this one specific group?
I would say yes. And I mean, to Dan's point, when you asked the question, you know, do we need a seniors advocate in every province and territory, or do we need a minister? And I agree with you. I think it's both, because if you have a minister of seniors, then one would hope the role would be to, similar I suppose to federal minister of seniors, to look horizontally across government and ensure that all those programs and services are interconnected, and that there's some organization around ensuring that the needs of seniors are understood and who is responsible for meeting those needs. And I'm not really seeing that right now.
What we really need is as Susan's alluding, we need a cross-ministerial process, a table that looks at seniors' issues, whether it's transportation, housing, healthcare, income supports, and other impacts that the government can make on the well-being of seniors. We need to see that right across the board in various ministries that can impact the well-being of seniors.
Time for a few more questions. Daria, I believe you're in the back row here.
Thank you. My name is Richard Kinlow. I've been a member of CARP for a long, long time, but never actually had the opportunity to come to an AGM. Thank you very much. Very well organized. It's interesting that our two speakers from Labrador, Newfoundland, and BC have very well organized programs, and I certainly understand the numerous issues that face retired people and face older people. And you were just starting to touch on the aspect of why is there not a federal emphasis on what you do? Because the interesting thing is that the federal government basically controls a lot of the stuff that impacts seniors, like our OAS, our pensions, whether our RIFs are mandated to be repaid, all of that types of thing. And I really didn't get the impression, and maybe it's my hearing aids that weren't working very well, but I really didn't get the impression that, or I'm asking you, because I didn't get the impression we got this particular type of answer, is what's happening on the federal level that basically addresses the issues that you are mandated to address? And if that's not the case, what efforts are being made to turn this into an important issue, even though everybody's concerned about Trump and different things like that and 25% tariffs? I think the important thing is that there are a whole bunch of constituents in this country, and older people represent a growing population and a growing part of the financial pie, whether they're generating that income themselves or whether they're getting it through government services. And why isn't there a federal initiative to do the types of things that you're doing in your jurisdictions? Thank you.
To tack onto that, when you answer, CARP is advocating for enveloped funds when feds transfer money to the provinces, so that things like home care are actually spent on home care and not sent into general revenue. Go ahead.
Well, I think it is critical that the transfer money that is allocated towards seniors. Recently, a program the past year was called Aging with Dignity. So it's really critical that that money is spent to where the money was dedicated, and the agreements are followed up on, and that there's accountability there so that we see the money well spent. And the issue around OAS of CPP, while that is a federal issue, it certainly impacts on seniors in our provinces. And in British Columbia, we have something called a BC Senior Supplement, which is similar to the GIS, and it's for the lowest income seniors. And we want to see programs like that being tied to inflation so that it actually keeps pace with inflationary costs. So there's definitely a tie-in between what's happening federally and what's happening provincially.
CARP has our top 5 topics that Rudy mentioned coming into the federal election, but they cut across the board, whether it's provincially mandated issues or federal issues. How does the federal government impact your work?
So similar to Dan and to the gentleman's question, so we are provincial advocates, so our recommendations are provincial in nature. We don't have federal responsibility or ability. However, as a seniors advocate group, there are 3 seniors advocates currently in the country. We do meet with the federal ministers on a regular basis and present a coast-to-coast view in terms of the needs of seniors throughout the country. And we have met with every seniors minister since the beginning of the first, Minister Cara. And we've individually met with the current Minister Thompson. And so we do present the needs that we see. There is definitely a connection, and similar to British Columbia, we have a benefit in Newfoundland and Labrador called the seniors benefit, and we've made a recommendation that it be indexed to inflation, and we've also made a recommendation that there stop being clawbacks on the federal benefits, which is the part that we have some control over. So all of a sudden a senior gets an increase to their OAS, and it's clawed back, you know, on the provincial side, and so we've made recommendations. That's where we have some ability to make you know, impact. Say, don't, you know, it was given for a reason. It wasn't for the provincial coffers to pick it up. It was for the senior who needed it. And so luckily in our province, they have agreed to index the provincial portion of the seniors benefits. So that was a recommendation of our office. So, you know, there's a definite connect, and we do our best to make a link. I do believe, and I'll just put the pitch in, that if every province had a seniors advocate, it would give a strength to that push at a federal level. I think it's helpful that we saw that the federal government recently changed such that the seniors minister is now just seniors. The previous was seniors and labor. I'm not sure seniors got a lot of the same level of attention when, as, you know, when it's an independent individual who only carries the one role. And so I'm hopeful go forward, regardless of what happens in the election, that we will see a seniors minister.
Thanks for your question, and thanks for coming out today. Hope you'll come back next year. Daria, question just behind you, Susan.
Hello, Hubert Van Niekerk. There's a lot of similarities between what you're doing in the province here. We had a child and youth advocate, and when there was a change of government, it was very quickly chopped. You know, so what would you say to other provinces that want a seniors advocate, and again, a child and youth advocate, oftentimes having people with disabilities? And I'll a general comment, maybe from earlier, is that I know minimum rates for seniors and poverty is at $26,000, and yes, provincial supports are less than half that. So there's a struggle, I think, between who do you pay? So mostly, what would you recommend, I think, in your position to get other provinces to buy into this and not have them change when there's a change of government?
And we're talking here to a large audience in Ontario who doesn't have a seniors minister. Our Alberta chapter has been advocating for it, along with our Saskatchewan chapter, made it one of their top issues, fell on deaf ears. So what might they see in your work that could convince other governments?
Go ahead. Okay, I'll just say, for Newfoundland and Labrador, it was groups like CARP that actually put the pressure on government and made government realize, oh, this is really important to the seniors in our province. So then it became an election promise. And I think that's what other provinces need to see happen. You need, you know, large organizations, like-minded organizations, like CARP. Some of the religious organizations were behind it in our province. Like whomever is carrying, you know, that strong voice for seniors really need to be saying to their MHAs or MPs or, you know, this is important to us, we want it. Yeah. And make the distinction, I'm sorry, I should make a distinction too, that we all have a role to play. Sometimes I think there's a belief that, oh, well, if we have a strong, you know, organization that represents seniors, then we don't need a seniors advocate. That is, the more voices, the better. There's strength in numbers.
When we look around the country and certainly look around the globe, there is a movement afoot to have a UN convention on the rights of older people. And I know that we're anxious to see that Canada supports that. And at the federal level, provincial level, and even municipal level, it's critical that we have some kind of a Bill of Rights, a charter that protects the rights of older adults, that we take this seriously, especially with the aging demographic. And we can look at different levels of government, and then the next part of that would be to have a plan to ensure that we're implementing that. We don't need to wait for the UN to have that convention. We can do this now at a national, provincial, and territorial and municipal level.
I was going to call you out on that. What good would it serve Canadians to have more talking heads at the UN talk about this? I think we have to have it here in legislation in Canada rather than worrying what's happening in New York.
Yes, and we were on a call recently, and that was exactly the question I asked to the movement, the people who are involved in this at the national level, is why not try to do this in Canada and show, like we have in history many times before, show that Canada is serious about this and we're demonstrating it can be done, and then encourage other countries to do it in their own countries.
Let them follow our lead. Daria, do you have a question there?
My name is Josephine. I was just wondering, because you come from different province with different population density, so I was wondering how this will relate to Toronto, which is really a growing city, so basically.
You're on, Dan.
Me first. Okay, so you're so right. I mean, there's no comparison between our largest city, which is St. John's, and Toronto from a population density perspective. Definitely not. And some of the dynamics of who's living here and the types of issues you face. What I will say to you, though, is that the needs of seniors tend to be similar throughout the country in that they're struggling with finances, they're struggling with access to healthcare, they are struggling with that they can't get housing at affordable rates. And while, yes, the housing might be pronounced in your province, and especially in urban, than it is in mine, the geography and transportation might be more of a challenge in my province than it is in yours, especially in the urban areas with public transit. And so while the struggles might be a little different in terms of the priorities, across the country, we're kind of hearing the same issues, that it's poverty, housing, access to healthcare. They're really the biggies. So I hope that helps answer towards your question. I'll let Dan go. You might have other things.
The only thing I would add to it is that wherever seniors are living, and Toronto's a good example, that we want to see that the communities where seniors are living are age-friendly and dementia-friendly. And for me, that means that the services that a senior requires and the community requires are available in their neighborhood, that they don't have to leave the community where they're living to get long-term care or to get seniors housing. And there's a senior center, and there's a wraparound services and programs available, and that it's accessible to get from the front door where you're living to the bus stop. And we want to see transportation being available and all these things working together. So I think that's something that we can be working on right across the country.
Well, thank you very much to Susan and Dan for the work that you do on behalf of CARP members, to the constituents in your provinces, and for making the trip to Toronto to join us here for our AGM. Thank you very much to both of you. Thank you. And we have one final segment coming up, so we're going to invite you to join us in the front row, and I'm going to ask Daria to strike one chair, and we're inviting up to the podium now, or pardon me, up to the stage now, the chairman of the board of CARP, the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, Mr. Moses Znaimer. He's also the gracious host of this annual general meeting and sharing the media facilities of Zoomer Media with us. So thank you very much, Moses, and please welcome back to the stage CARP President Rudy Boutignon.
No, Moses, you're on this side.
We're all seniors advocates here, but we appear to have forgotten that seniors have seniors' bladders. I'm sure you're all eager to wrap this up. So we'll try not to be very long. All right, Rudy,
Okay.
What's your question?
Well, the question was, why did you drink so much coffee? I avoided it for that very reason, but all right. So we've heard the needs of seniors in every facet of life. It all sounds like more money, right? More funding. At the same time, we're facing incredibly difficult headwinds, right? In terms of the economy, in terms of the political situation. We're full of debt and deficit at the federal and provincial level. How do you see these economic and political headwinds affecting seniors?
Well, the answer is in your question, and your speech preempted much of what I might have to say, which only leaves me the unfortunate role of being the Grinch in this discussion. Policy discussion is mostly air. I've been into this game for 18 years, and generally speaking, we excavate the same issues over and over and over again. The pressing issues for seniors are always two things: physical security and financial security. And depending what's happening out in the world, they're number one or number two or number two or number one. So I will illustrate my major point with two short little anecdotes about a politician called Justin Trudeau. In 2015, 3 weeks before he rose to power unexpectedly, I got a call from a Liberal Party functionary asking that I should organize a special meeting of CARP in this facility for free, because they had an important announcement to make. And as it turned out, the date that they chose fell on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. So I said, well, wait a minute. You know, we have many Jewish members, particularly in the Toronto area. That would be very inconvenient. They might not be able to attend. And they insisted. We're in the campaign. It's coming to a close. We've got lots of other bookings. It'll be worth your while. So we organized it. Just about a week notice. And Justin, shiny, new, pretty, and aspiring politician, came in and made us two terrific promises. The first was that he would roll back the age of OAS eligibility, which the previous government, the Harper government, had raised from 65 to 67. There are many arguments why that is actually not a bad thing, because the question is not only when you start getting the money, but how long you will continue to get the money. And since we're all living longer on the whole and generally better, it was not an inappropriate to do, but the Conservatives, Flaherty and Harper, decided to do it in Davos without any discussion, and that really bummed us out. So Justin came and he said, I'm going to roll that back. And then he said, we know you're concerned about the income of low-income seniors, and I'm going to raise the subsidy to them. And 3 weeks later, unexpectedly, he became the prime minister, and within a month of taking office, he fulfilled those two promises. 9 years later, the same Justin Trudeau, after a disastrous reign, complete with many vanity projects which had skyrocketed the national debt, began to pussyfoot with a professor called Paul Kershaw, policy professor at the UBC, who was fomenting a war of generations. He had started an organization called Generation Squeeze and announced when he started it that his objective was to be for the Gen X, Gen Y, the millennials, what CARP was for the older demographics. And his argument was, as Rudy pointed out in his speech, that if these guys get more, these guys get less. Now here's where the rubber hits the road. He couches it in policy talk, and he offers up a reasonable proposition that if you're making more money, you might be able to get a little of this less. But what's really going on is, at a time when the budgets have been basically stalled because all the money has been spent, with Mr. Trump adding enormous pressure by insisting on patrols at the border, which are going to cost a couple $2 billion, and that Canada refurbish its dilapidated military and meet a 3% target or a 5% target for military spending, we are heading to a period of austerity, and that austerity is going to come out of your hides. It's going to begin as a discussion about a cap. We're not going to do for the 65 to 74-year-olds what we're doing for the 75-year-old plus. but it's going to extend to a rollback because there is no other way to find the money. The thing about our gang is our number is big. So it stands out on a piece of paper, and it's what is going to be attacked. So what is the defense? The defense is numbers. How many politicians will do something because the right thing? Not that many. How many politicians will do something because they're trying to get elected? That's the moment of maximum pressure. That's when you can actually get something done. Writing policy papers, forgive me, I've grown cynical. They call for these papers all the time. We sweat over them. We do the research. We file them. They don't look at them. They never act on them. It's window dressing. But when Justin wanted to get elected, or the next guy wants to get elected, that's the moment. So they're going to look at this organization, and they're going to see two things. The first is the number. Not too long ago, 300,000, 250,000 were good numbers for a policy advocacy in the country when the political parties themselves altogether barely hit that number. But we're now in the age of social media. We're now in the age of AI. Any influencer, a kid sitting in his basement, has 1 million followers. So the politician looks at our number, and he looks at the influencer's number, and he says, oh, not bad, but not that important. What makes CARP different, what gives us the amplified power, was my little insight. And my little insight is there are today in Canada an estimated 170,000 nonprofit organizations. There are today in Canada 86,000 registered charities. There are in Canada today 80 to 100,000 general nonprofit groups of all sizes and interests who are not registered as charities, and every one of these organizations is an advocacy. They all are pushing something, and they're writing reports, and they're sending them to Ottawa and to the provincial capitals, and the only thing that makes CARP stand out is, do we have the numbers in membership and Zoomer media? All these other organizations pray for a sliver of attention from the establishment players. If they get one story a year out of the CBC, they're delirious. If they get a story out of the Globe and Mail, wow. Some of the larger organizations keep permanent staff, half dozen people, a dozen people, whose job is to curry the favor and get that little sliver of attention. So what my insight did is it married an advocacy to a permanent media organization. And we have access, CARP, I'm speaking as CARP, to 24/7, 365 days a year access to radio, to television, to magazines, to 24 different websites and digital properties. And that is the only difference that a politician will pay attention to. Don't let them tell you otherwise. So, we talk airy-fairy, but the practical reality is you've got to help to get our membership number up. We write great policy. Rudy just developed a fabulous policy document, fantastic. But what are the deliverables? And what are you going to do, and when are you going to do it?
Well, we started by adding 40.
I don't want you to answer me. I'm in the middle.
All right. I didn't think so.
Right. So when I arrived 18 years ago, we had approximately 300,000 members. That's shocking when you consider that we have 250,000 today. We sold 40,000 members. That's an incredibly good number, but our members have a habit, they die. Yes, or some of them get vague and they kind of drift away. So it's been very difficult to get the number moving. When I first got here with 300,000 members, I gathered our team and I said, we're on a march to 1 million. How did I come up with the 1 million number? I said, well, If a member believes in what we represent, if they believe in what we're trying to achieve on their behalf, how hard would it be for every person to bring in 2 members? Your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, your neighbor. How hard is it? That's what we have to put to you. And it's the people in this room and the people online and the people in the general membership. If they would each pledge to bring in 2 members, simplicity itself, but pledge it and do it, we would get to 1 million. And if we had 1 million, no politician would tamper with our entitlements. Nobody would be sitting there listening to Mr. Kershaw, because Justin, just before he resigned, flew out to Vancouver to meet with Paul Kershaw and to look at Mr. Kershaw's research and to declare it interesting, because that politician, the new Justin Trudeau, today's Justin Trudeau, before he resigned, had his back up against the wall. And whether it's the Minister of Finance or Mr. Carney or whoever it is gets that job, with the added pressure of Mr. Trump, they're going to have a really tough job, because the Treasury is empty. It was emptied by 9 years of systematic deficits against all sanity and against all advice on a lot of wacko stuff. And they're going to be looking for the big numbers to save, and you are one of the biggest numbers on the budget sheet. So get out and bring us those 2 members. And I look at Anthony and I look at Rudy, and you guys have to stop talking about it and develop some serious to-do programs, right? Pull together people, get into telephone rooms, call a bunch of members who have laps, do those things that we've talked about a lot but never get done. Or this organization will begin to suffer some of the consequences I'm talking about. We're not kidding around. That's what I have to add.
Well, this is the first time I had a job performance evaluation before our members, and it just goes to show that we are fully accountable. We hear you, Moses. We're on the case. Thank you. Do you want to wrap it up? All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much. We've
What's
got.
that? Well, I'm concerned about people needing a bio break here.
Anybody that needs a bio break is free to just move out. But if there are any questions, yes.
My name is Robert Roden. I live in Etobicoke now, but I would like to know, what is our organization doing to put pressure on our local politicians to reverse those mean-spirited closures of High Park?
We're trying to support that effort by keeping it in the public eye, by having the advocates who are against those closures, and I am against those closures. I live in High Park. I think they're outrageous, and that they've been put in there by the so-called left wing of council is incomprehensible. They seem more interested in safeguarding the park for crazy cyclists going at murderous speeds than they are to permit access for older people who need cars, for younger people, kids who need cars, for sports teams. It's absurd, it's ridiculous, it's awful, but just signing a petition doesn't seem to be enough. The next opportunity will be when they run for election. We've got to get the left wing of council out of office.
Yes, we actually spoke to a woman who said that she was widowed by those cyclists.
I was almost run down by one not too long ago. Yeah.
Yeah, we think the closures are absolutely criminal.
They are criminal. They seem to think that the best park is a park without people in it. And I go into that park 2-3 times a week. It's a magnificent park. I've actually donated a tree to that park, a tree of 40 fruit which I hope will finally blossom this year. It's been growing for the last 7 years.
Yeah. And that park was donated to the city by John Howard on the condition that it should be open to all citizens of Toronto.
That's right, but it's the left wing of City Council that has this crazy idea that they're going to curtail access to the park in order to, I don't know, run it as a private park for themselves. You can tell by going into it that the attendance is severely reduced, but more importantly, who is it reduced by? It is the elderly who need car access. It is the people with handicaps who need car access. It is the families with young children who need car access. It's absurd. What we need maybe is more strenuous resistance. I'm struggling not to use that word, resistance, but maybe we need sit-ins. Maybe grannies need to get together and set up a bunch of tents and start sleeping in the park. I'm half serious.
You were very eloquent. You know, when I was watching you walking up, I thought, I wonder what he's going to have to say. I wonder how dynamic and how, you know, sort of excited he is about this organization and what kind of thought process does he have. And you really fulfilled, for me anyway, a lot of my confidence in this leadership. But you know what's interesting? You talk about, you know, when I was looking at the financials, and I didn't want to bring it up at the financial section, because then you're just being a show-off. You know how to read numbers. But I had noticed that we went from 1.5 million in revenues, membership revenues, to 1.3. And I sort of thought, okay, well, what's behind this? And, you know, it's interesting. You hit the nail on the head, right? You said, I arrived here, we're 300,000 members, and now we're 250. What, you know, and then you talk about something else. You basically talk about, and I think it's a great idea, that all of us, I'm a member, you know, we know people of, you know, should be members of CARP, and, you know, I can approach 2 people and maybe 5 people, because you're not going to get 2 out of 2. And that's great. But where's this? And also, I don't want to come across as criticizing how CARP and Zoomer promote themselves and promote their services, because it's excellent. But I'm a member, so I get the Zoomer magazine. It's terrific. It really covers a lot of stuff, from stuff that would be interesting to people who are under 50, but certainly stuff over 50. And I get the email addresses, you know, the newsletters and everything else. I know this is pretty neat, pretty neat. But we're not using, I don't know, and this is where you guys can basically object to what I'm about to say, but are we using social media to, I mean, we are a bunch of old fogies who are hanging around, and you know, we're watching AI, and we kind of know what it, you know, A and an I, but we're not using any of those services. You know, like, how many people are over 50 in this country? How many people?
It's a massive amount. We're up to 40% of the population if you're dealing with 50 plus.
Okay, so we're like, what, almost 40 million people?
Well, 40 million in total. Some of them are French speaking, but you can do the math. 40%.
But you know, you got 15 million people, let's say, who should be members of this organization, not a million.
Yep.
Certainly not 250.
Yep.
So we've got to develop, like, we've got great, I mean, when I look at the stuff.
I'll give you one answer.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll shut up now.
An analogous organization is AARP in the United States. AARP in the United States has about 37 million members. It's considered the most powerful advocacy in the USA. When I arrived and I analyzed what was the underpinning to that membership, it turned out that when Americans hit a certain age of retirement, or if they left their employment, they lost their insurance. So the primary motive for joining AARP was AARP had gathered enough people of a certain age, the 50 plus, and convinced an insurance company to begin to cover them. We have socialized medicine. It's not that good anymore, but it's supposed to be a crown of Canada. And so I understood that I couldn't just divide their 35 million by 10 and say that our reasonable target in Canada was 3 million. So I said, no, let's cut it in half because we have socialized medicine. That's the primary driver of their attendance. And then I said, we have to take out the French speakers, but we do have a plausible target of 1 million, 1.5 million. And your question is entirely appropriate. Why don't we have 1 million, 1.5 million? Well, attrition is one part of it. We're an organization of older people, and older people come and go. But I think it's also the passivity of our membership and the failures to date of management. And he's new, so he can't be entirely blamed. Yeah, but Anthony's been around a long time. Yeah, you can beat up on him, he deserves it. Yeah, but obviously, ultimately, it's me. And we have tried many things. I'm convinced that it is actually the grassroots word, which is so much loved by politicians, that would make the difference. If really we could convince every member, maybe do a fabulous contest, maybe give away an enormous prize, but go out and bring in 2 members. You'll not only advance the organization, you will secure the fact that those people eyeing the big number that we represent will not tamper with it in order to get the money that they need to spend on the military and to spend on whatever it is that Mr. Trump dreams up in the next little while. Numbers, 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 that's it. Policy, I hate to say it, I know many of you people put your life in it, but dime a dozen, really. Everybody intuitively knows what should be done. A politician pays attention to our numbers. About your question about social media, well, CARP.ca is obviously a website. But are we doing enough in social? No, I don't think so. And where we once used to communicate with members a couple times a year or through the magazine on its printing schedule, and now Rudy has promised to increase the frequency of the CARP action communication, social is a world of not only daily communications, it's every 10 minutes. You're quite right. And we have to internally figure out how to get that done. We have to move into that more frequent communication mode and hope to get to younger people. When I first got here and I began to talk to people about joining CARP, Rudy touched on it in his remarks. Many people said, I'm not there yet. I'm too young for CARP. And I kept saying, it's not just about you. It's about the people you love, God forbid, the people you actually love. Could be parents, could be grandparents, and for those of you who are older, it's about your kids. So the first thing I did is I abolished the bylaw that CARP then had that mandated membership only for people 50 plus. I said, that makes no sense. We're fighting age discrimination, and here we are discriminating by age. I don't care. You like what we're doing, you like the organization that's going to take care of your grandparents, you got 20 bucks, you're in. So our youngest member is 6 months old. You can see her picture in the hallway. It's Marissa Lennox's daughter, and she's holding her CARP card. Yeah. So it comes back to you, really. And I know over the years our management has been very tentative, very timid about imposing on you because you're volunteers. But if you're volunteering, it's because you believe, and if you believe, get into gear and go back to your chapters and pass this thing along. And let's see if we can really get a groundswell and get a mass of people bringing in 2 members. That's not a lot. Bring in 2 members on a base of 250,000, we'd have 750,000 members. Are you kidding? They'd be rolling out the red carpet to us in every political capital, including the municipal one. Yeah. All right, enough. Yeah, I think so. There's,
okay.
I don't know.
Speak very loudly. No.
Not loud enough, trust me.
This doesn't require an answer or any explanation. Right now, Canada has got a new form of ism. It is called Canadianism. We are all into this country. So I would like the Zoomer magazine to put photos, your front cover. There's got to be Canadians that want to go on there, as opposed to, let's say, share it. I appreciated the article, and Janet Lee Curtis, great. But I really think you've got to take this opportunity to make it a Canadian magazine, I don't know, but that cover as to, because this is the time where everybody thinks Canada is important, including Quebec. So there you go.
We don't have that many celebrities in Canada. Believe me, everyone that we could find has already been on the cover. And some of them twice and 3 times. Hmm? Just anybody. How about you?
Oh, I have an idea. Why don't you have a contest?
Yeah.
For CARP, how to renew 2 memberships. So here's the thing. For everyone that brings you 5 new members, they get their picture in a pot or in a bin. And then all the 5 new members that buy a long-term membership, not just that you can cancel, they all go in, and then you have your Zoomer media team, your Zoomer magazine team, and yourself.
That's
go
a
like
great
this.
idea.
Input
the prize
out.
is you get your you get your picture on the cover.
Yes. And you
That's
are.
a good idea.
There you go. Collaboration.
That's a good idea.
Right?
Yeah.
And that could be part of the new CARP initiative that the gentleman in the back said, why don't we have the members?
Yeah.
And just to your point, when you first took over CARP, and I went to a presentation to listen to what CARP was about, that was 20 years ago. And I bought a membership that day because it doesn't take a lot of convincing to understand the value of what the organization stands for. And of course, back then I was, 20 years younger, and this age seemed a long time away. Now at this age, my next 20 years seems like it's happening tomorrow. That is the beauty of aging. You have wisdom that comes with it. But I think the whole thing is like, we have to get younger Canadians involved to appreciate what aging is about, because they don't understand it.
Oh.
They don't understand what aging is about.
Well, I mean, there was method to my madness. CARP is a word that is indelible in people's mind and represents some of the challenges of aging. I invented the word Zoomer to represent the optimism, the gusto, the future. That's how they relate, really. It wasn't an accident. For all those people who said, I'm not ready for CARP as if it was a stigma, there's Zoomer. And the two together, I think, are a fairly fulsome solution.
I'm a big believer.
Thank you very much, Moses and Rudy, and everyone who's joined us in the room and online. Thank you for joining our annual general meeting. And we look forward to a really big number next year at our AGM. Thanks, everyone. Could I ask Susan and Dan to come up for a photograph, please? And